This is a great guy that I should contact and see if we can set something up, a nice dialogue and exchange of ideas. So after a few emails and a few phone calls and a face-to-face meeting, we set this kind of thing up. And we had a really good time last year. 2 meetings. We had a good night last night in UBC, and I hope you find tonight interesting and intriguing. So with that, Pat, I'm just going to hand the mic over to you and let you take over from here. And welcome to Kenneth.
Can you hear me? I can talk really loud. How's that? Thank you, Bruce, for the too kind introduction. I also want to thank the co-sponsors tonight, and I'd like to extend a special thanks to the 10th Avenue Church for inviting a bunch of atheists and infidels to your home. It must be nice to be involved in such an enlightened congregation. They tried to find somebody to moderate who had no opinion on religion. They looked under a few rocks and behind a few trees and were unsuccessful, so they're stuck with me. Who was at the debate last night? A few people. Okay, so you can. This is a good time to check your emails because I'm going to go over some things that I went over last night. Tonight you're going to hear some things that are going to probably upset you. Probably hear some things that are going to oppose your deeply held values and ideals. But I think I speak for both debaters when I say that the intention here is not to not to be offensive, but rather to help you learn something about the other person's worldview. And one of my favorite quotes I think that is appropriate is from Aristotle, who said, "It's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." So hopefully we'll be doing some entertaining tonight. Not only that, if you hear something you don't like, you'll have ample opportunity later during our question and answer period to challenge our speakers. Keep in mind it is a question and answer period, not a rebuttal and answer period, not a soliloquy and answer period. So keep your answers brief. We do have to be out of here at 9:30, so we want to keep things moving. So we appreciate it if you could help with that. Now, who came here to listen to me tonight? Good answer. The question tonight: what is the origin and the nature of morality? Our debaters will have 20 minutes each to put forth their arguments, and then there'll be a 10-minute rebuttal. And then we'll have a 10 to 15-minute dialogue over in the comfy chairs, in an attempt to kind of bring out the debaters a little bit more, get into some of the more personal aspects of why and what they believe. And then we'll have the dreaded question and answer period. So I'd like to introduce our debaters tonight in the order that they'll appear. I'm going to introduce them both now just to keep things moving later. Our first debater, Dr. Fazale Rana. Fuz is the Vice President of Science Apologetics for Reasons to Believe. His research as an agnostic, a biochemistry student, provided initial evidence that life originated from a creator. He earned an undergraduate degree in chemistry with highest honors from West Virginia State College. He completed a PhD in chemistry with an emphasis in biochemistry at Ohio University, where he twice won the Donald Clippinger Research Awards. He is the author of several books, including his most recent, The Cell's Design, which is available back, and he'll autograph them for you later. Mahbudat Javed. Mahbudat is a UBC student holding a BA in philosophy and is completing his bachelor's of science in computer engineering. He spends his time on the philosophy of science, the philosophy of religion, and ethics. As a formerly devout theist, Mahbudat helps organize regular religious secular dialogues to critically examine questions of faith with believers. Our first speaker, Dr. Rana.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I need to make a confession here as we begin tonight, and that is that I'm not an ethicist, philosopher, or theologian, but rather I'm a scientist and I'm a Christian, so I sort of feel a little bit out of my element talking about the origin and the nature of morality, so I'm going to do the best I can. And I'm going to try to defend the position that a Christian perspective on the origin of morality and the nature of morality has validity. And perhaps I'm going to do this in a way that's a little bit different than you would typically see in a type of debate like this. And the first question on the table, is this. Here we go. And that is, what is morality? And the way that I view morality is this, that it's a set of principles or rules that distinguish right and wrong behaviors. That's what I mean when I'm talking about morality. And of course, this leads to, I think, the questions that are really on the table tonight, and that is morality objective or relative? What is the basis for morality? Where does it come from? Does it arise from evolutionary processes? Or is morality revealed to us via a creator? And the Christian view on morality is this, that it is objective, that it's universal, and that it is indeed revealed to us. And it's revealed to us not only through Scripture, but also it's revealed to us by being written on the human heart. This is the Christian view. And this idea that there's an intrinsic understanding of right and wrong is motivated by passages like Romans 2, 14 and 15, where Paul writes to the church at Rome this, that indeed when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. And again, what Paul is arguing here is that there's an intrinsic understanding of right and wrong that all human beings have, and that intrinsic understanding is revealed to us via a creator. And in addition to that intrinsic understanding, there's also Scripture that represents revelation as well, that includes a moral code. Now, from a Christian perspective, morality is a characteristic that humans possess that is subsumed by a larger property or a larger characteristic that we would call the image of God. And not to spend a lot of time reading Scripture, but I think most people are familiar with this well-known passage in Genesis 1 that describes human beings being created in God's image. And again, we would argue that morality is part of the image of God. And so when human beings are created in God's image, we're created as intrinsically moral beings. Now, the image of God is not really defined any place in Scripture. And there's a number of models that people have proposed to try to understand or make sense of what the image of God is. And the one that I think is the most useful for this evening's discussion is one that sees the image of God as being constituted by 4 different components. An intellectual component, which is our creativeness, our technical inventiveness, a capacity of human beings to have rational thought, symbolic representation of the world, the capacity to express ourselves not only through language but through art and music. There's a moral component, a sense that there's right and wrong, a desire for justice, a spiritual component, which is a recognition of a reality beyond the physical material universe, and then a relational component, which is a desire to relate to other people as well as to a creator in a complex social manner. And so this is one model for how we would understand the image of God. And the idea is that human beings uniquely possess this property. Now, what I'm going to do is basically argue that there is a scientific rationale for believing that human beings are made in God's image. And by establishing that, I hope to, as a consequence, establish the idea that it's rational to think, again, that human beings are uniquely, moral beings, and that the Christian view of the image of God and, consequently, morality has a rational basis. Now, how on earth are you going to demonstrate something like the image of God scientifically? Well, I believe that one way this can be done is by looking at the archaeological record and looking for when behavior emerges that we would understand to emanate from the image of God. The image of God is going to manifest itself in certain behavioral properties that human beings engage in, and those behaviors are going to lead to the production of certain artifacts that will constitute the archaeological record. So what I'm going to do is argue that the archaeological record provides a means by which we can understand when the image of God appears and with whom or what the image of God is associated. And the archaeological record extends back to about 2.5 million years ago, where creatures like Homo habilis begin utilizing tools, again, in the neighborhood of 2.5 million years ago, or at least begin to utilize stone tools. And these tools that are utilized are crude tools that essentially consist of stone flakes that are produced when a core stone is hit with a hammer stone, and these flakes are used as a means to scavenge meat from carcasses. And this technology, if you want to call it that, persists for about 1 million years when it's replaced by another technology we call the Acheulean technology, or Mode 2 technology, associated with Homo erectus. And this technology is only slightly more sophisticated than what you see Homo habilis engaged in. And in fact, the behavior of Homo habilis and of Homo erectus is comparable to behavior that we've observed recently for chimpanzees in the wild. The quality of tool use that is engaged in by these hominids is not that much different from the great apes that we observe in the wild today. At about 250,000 years ago, Neanderthals appear on the scene, roughly speaking, and there's a new technology that emerges, again, more sophisticated than that of what Homo erectus is engaged in, but not that much more sophisticated, qualitatively speaking. And then at 50,000 years ago, approximately, there's something remarkable that happens in the fossil record, and this is called the sociocultural Big Bang, the human revolution. This is just an example of the types of tools that you would see Homo erectus and Homo habilis utilizing. But we see at 50,000 years this sociocultural Big Bang, where virtually out of nowhere, sophisticated behavior emerges in a dramatic manner. This is how Christopher Stringer and Robin McVee describe it, that before then, Homo sapiens, and when they use this term, they're not referring to human beings, modern humans, but rather hominids that preceded humans in the fossil record. Before then, Homo sapiens was marking time culturally. For millennia upon millennia, they've been churning out the same forms of stone utensils, but about 40,000 years ago, a perceptible shift in the handiwork took place. Toolkits leapt in sophistication. The signs and use of ropes, both spear points, fish hooks, and harpoons emerge, along with the sudden manifestation of sculptures, paintings, and musical instruments. We also find evidence for the first long-distance exchange of stones and beads. It's an extraordinary catalog of achievements that seem to have come from nowhere. And what I would argue is that this particular explosion in human uniqueness associated with human beings could be understood as evidence that this image of God that human beings bear, according to the Christian worldview, was indeed an act of creation, and then consequently morality comes into existence as a result of that. Nothing, I think, exemplifies a sociocultural Big Bang more than the artwork that you see in the caves of France and Spain, as well as the art that's been discovered in the caves of Germany as well. This is just a typical type of artistic mural that is found in the cave art that appears, again, about 30 to 40,000 years ago. And it appears explosively. Again, there's no evolution of art. It appears out of nowhere when human beings make their way into Europe. And there's no evolution of art. It's as sophisticated when it first appears as art is today. In fact, if you go to a modern art museum, you might even argue it's more sophisticated than what you see currently being produced by artists as they explore what art is and what art isn't.